In this section, we're going to take a look at using the Broad Institute's Terra.bio workflow tool. So you'd use this tool because you want to scale out some type of research on GCP. So it's a layer that runs on top and orchestrates your compute for you so that a lot of the configuration settings that we've been looking at in this course are done through best practice workflows. Now, when you work with this, you can use either notebooks, and we looked at that in a previous movie, or workflows. Now, within the workflows, you can either configure a best practice workflow using tools like GATK or Hail, and that's a good place to start, and run that with your data. Or you can actually build a workflow from scratch. Now, building a workflow from scratch is actually pretty complex, and what I've done for this demo is I've built a workflow with just a single tool, which again is kind of like a hello world. Real world, you're going to have multiple tools running, but just to give you an idea of what it looks like. So you're going to want to read all the materials on this page. This talks about GATK, and again, we're looking at this section of the compute management. And when you work with Terra, if you're new, you can use $300 in GCP credit. But when you're using actual scaled research, you're generally going to be using GCP resources that will be billed to your research group. So again, a best practice is to start with a smaller size workflow if practical, and then build up so that you can understand the potential costs you might incur from like a full GWAS workflow, for example. So I have a number of screenshots here. The general process is you log in, then you're going to configure your data. Now you have access to reference public data that's hosted on GCP, and there's an interface in Terra that you just go to the Terra library data and you can work with 1,000 genomes or some of the other reference data sets to which your email account might have research level access. And then you're going to associate your research data. Now you can do that. There's really two patterns. You can put it in a cloud storage bucket, or you can use the Terra Workspace data section, which is a data model that has been created to work with genomic types of files. Again, that's if you're configuring your own workflow. And I have a little bit of information about it, but I really recommend if you're just starting, you run pre-created workflows. It's a better way to start. So you can see when you log on to Terra, you view the workspaces, examples, or browse that reference data. And it's a GUI interface. It's a website. And that is the section for showcases and tutorials. A lot of them are built around Broad tools such as GATK4 and Hail, and some of the other really commonly used tools in analysis. Here is a screenshot of the reference data. There's 1,000 genomes, which of course everybody has access to, and then there's some other data sets that are available there, which again, you want to reference these rather than uploading because these are already in the Google Cloud, so it makes your analysis run faster. And then you're going to go and work with your particular workspace, and you can either use notebooks, which I said was covered in a previous movie, or you could work with workflows. So I'm going to actually switch over and just show you the results of running a workflow so you can understand kind of the process. So inside of the Terra workspace, you would have workspaces configured, and you just click here to create a new workspace. And the workspace that I'm using for this is called Demo. Notice the menu has this sort of interface. Whenever you see the circle of 3 dots, there's things you can do. So in this particular workspace, you first have a wiki page, and then if you have data associated, in this case, we do have some data associated. So we have some cohort data, and we have a BigQuery table. And if you wanted to add more data, you would just click the plus sign here. We could add reference data. We could add other data as well. And when you are working with the samples, a tip is if you clone the whole workspace, if there's data associated, you get that data as well. Whereas if you just copy an object, so a notebook or a WDL file, and put that into your workspace, you won't get the data associated. So a best practice is clone the workspace. So then in terms of workflows, you can implement a best practice or you can build your own. Now this is going to be running on top of Google Pipelines or Genomics API, and then it's going to be using the Broad's workflow coordination engine in Cromwell. But all these details are pretty much abstracted away from you, whether you're using WDL to configure Cromwell yourself or whether you're using a best practice workflow. So what I've done is I've created this workflow using the blastn tool. And if you're looking for workflows or tools, again, in your particular workspace, a best practice is to click this plus, and you can search through the suggested workflows to see if somebody's already built a best practice. You know, I'm really emphasizing this because kind of the point of working with Terra is to reuse workflows that are already created as best practice. Now, if you don't find anything here, then you can go out to a registry called DocStore, or you could go to the Broad's methods repository and you can look for, as it says here, around 700 public workflows. So I actually built this in DocStore, and so I'll just show you what this looks like. And the underlying methodology is you create a container, and then you have to have some metadata about the inputs and outputs, in this case of blastn, in a WDL file, and then you generally will put default parameters in a JSON file, and then you register this as a tool in either DocStore or in the tool section for Terra, and then that's available in a workflow. So once you have that, then inside of here you can see that if I go to the script section, this shows the WDL, just super simple. And then I have an inputs section here. Again, I'm actually maybe ironically pointing to a different cloud vendor bucket. Like I said, you can use data from the data model, or you can use data on really any publicly available cloud bucket. In Terra, you'd normally use cloud storage, but I just happen to have this data up in Amazon. And then you see where the output will be, and then you click this button to run the analysis. Now this takes 5 to 10 minutes because you're going on to in this case, the Broad Institute's group of Google Compute Engine instances, and so there's a queuing or a waiting process. So I went ahead and I ran this, and it succeeded. And you can see here's blastn, it was run today. And if I click inside of here into the submission ID, you can see that I'm taken to a cloud storage bucket that was generated when I set up this workflow. Again, Terra is abstracting a lot of the lower level configuration, but it is running on cloud storage and Compute Engine. So you can see here's the workflow. And I click in here. And I'm looking for this output file. And that's my result, basically, of running blastn. And there's my result. So my result is, scroll down here. My result is correct. And then other information when you're working with workflows is you can look in your bucket and you can look under standard error. Let me just go back to it here. And standard out. And you can also look at the log from your particular tool. Like I have a blastn log here, and you can see here's standard error and standard out. So it's a place to look to understand the overhead of your job to see if maybe you misconfigured something. Now, if I click into the job history, you can also see in the Terra interface that I have a submission ID, I have a workflow ID, and then you can see it succeeded. If it was in the queue, you would see that it was in queue, it was waiting. If I click the view here, this is going to take me into the job manager, and this shows me information about the job. It shows me the view, the inputs, the outputs, if there are any labels, and interestingly to me, the timing diagram This shows for each of the steps how long each step in this pipeline took. And just like working with any sort of pipeline product, I really like these visual tools because they can help me to understand if I'm either working with a workflow, if it needs to be scaled up more, maybe I have more data, or if I'm configuring one, if there's a bottleneck in that workflow.